Good afternoon, good morning, and perhaps good evening if you're on the other side of the world. Thank you for joining this session on water and food, making two ends meet. I am Ivo Demmers. I'm director of the Water and Food Research Program within Wageningen University and Research. And I will be your moderator for this afternoon, this session, which will take 1 hour, and in which we will have a nice lineup of speakers. And I have to say, we're still trying to get the first speaker well equipped online. So that provides me some time to introduce this session to you. The session on water and food is of utmost importance, and it's very timely as the COP on climate has just started this afternoon. And also the Amsterdam Water Week started this morning. But water and food and making the connections between the both silos, so to speak, needs to be done more. Agriculture uses 70% of the fresh water available. And if you realize that 97% of water available on the world is salt water, we have to deal with that 3% water. And of that 3% water, 70% is frozen. But also within the food systems, there are large transitions. They are needed to reduce greenhouse gas emission, adapt to climate change, deal with biodiversity, and last but not least, combat hunger. As still as of today, 820 million people are hungry, and even more, 2 billion people are having bad access to a healthy diet. So a lot of improvement has to be made there. And in that respect, and that is what you can see, the Food and Water Coalition of the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality. We as Wageningen University and Research, top sector AGRI-Food, Netherlands Food Partnership and the Netherlands Water Partnership have put together this session to show how that water and food can be connected, and to show you that biodiversity, sustainability, climate change, health and development of livelihoods can be improved simultaneously. We will touch upon examples from several levels, ranging from conceptual level to farm level. A quick look in the program. We have 3 speakers, then followed by a panel discussion. And you're welcome to share your Q&A questions in the Q&A box in the Hopin account. I hope you can find that, and otherwise you can use the chat, but for your questions, please use the Q&A so that our experts, panelists, or speakers can directly reply to your questions. And if some questions are left unanswered, Simke Kruiderink, who you cannot see this afternoon, but she's definitely there, will be available to follow up your leads of the questions that are not answered. So we will make sure your questions are answered, maybe not today, but later. Without further ado, I will try to reach out to the first speaker, and that is Peter Diaz. Peter, are you available right now? And I hope to get a word from him.
Peter is not yet available.
Okay.
If you could first start with Adriaan, then Peter will join afterwards.
Terrific. Yeah, thanks, Pepijn. We'll do that. You see Peter Diaz, but the second in line was Adriaan Antonis. He's a senior researcher at the Animal Sciences Group of Wageningen University and Research. And he will take us to into the world of water and circular agriculture. Adriaan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ivo. I'm trying to share my screen. And I hope you can all see it now.
I do.
Yes, okay. With great pleasure, I'm going to introduce you to the 9 colors and perhaps 10 appearances of water, which we use within the WUR to provide insight into the role of water in a sustainable food system. and to inspire stakeholders of the same system to take a critical look at how we can limit the use of valuable drinking water and upgrade the reuse and reuse the used water. The Dutch have a special relationship with water. Historically, this has mainly to do with the high water amount from out the sea, and that's because of the location of the situation of the Netherlands, because big parts are below sea level. So my ancestors had to fight against water for centuries, and there are a few impressive buildings which I want to share with you. And this is the Asselt, which has protected the Netherlands for more than 80 years from the sea. So that's over here, a very nice building. That's, for example, the Oosterscheldekering, a barrier that is one of the largest delta works also of the Netherlands. And the third example I want to share here is the Wouda steam pumping station, which protects us also against the natural forces of water. So we have quite a lot of experience in fighting against water, and that will change in the nearby future because things are going to change, and Ivo mentioned them already a little bit before. Because of the increase of sea level, we have to deal for the next decades with the salinization of the coastal areas. You can see very nice in this picture. So things are going to change in agriculture. But there is more. There are more challenges. That was also mentioned before already. We have to deal with a growing world population, and that's also in the Netherlands. So the population of the Netherlands is growing. And a growing of a world population, that means that we will have an increased demand for food and also for feed. We have to deal with climate changes, and the climate changes in combination with the increasing demand for food will lead to all kinds of problems. And one of those problems is the desiccation of farming land. And that will lead, that's where we are afraid of for more hunger, for starvation, and perhaps that will lead to geopolitical wars. So let's focus then on water, because water plays a very essential role in this. And let's focus a little bit more on water's role in a complex system. And water is really essential for life, and I don't need to convince you about that. Water is essential for life. Water is in all our individual cells, in all human beings, but also in plants. Water is a carrier of nutrients on the macro, meso, and the micro level. Water plays a really important role as a mode of transport. We all agreed already that tap water should be available for everybody on Earth, but water is one of the is really a finite biological resource. So we really need to think about how we can reduce the use of potable drinking water, and how we can reuse used water, and how we can recycle water, and all the other R's that are available in Potik's letter. Let me introduce you to the 9 colors of water and start with white. And white is water in the air, and that can be a solid, it can be fluid, it can be a gas fraction. When it touches the rivers and the lakes, then we call it blue. But when it touches the roofs of the houses of other buildings or the soil, then we call it green. Then it soaks into the ground to a deeper level, and then we call it terra. From this terra source, we can have a potable water, and that's the color aqua in our system. Tapping water, which is most of the time potable water, is also used in many households for processing food, and that's the color gray, so gray water. And this same tapping water is also used in order to flush our toilets, and that will be then the black water. This is a complex system on terrestrial areas, but it will end in the end in the seas. And then we have the coastal areas where we have designated the color turquoise, which is really a fertile area. And we have a large infertile area with deep waters, and that is the color indigo. So these are the 9 different colors. There are 10 appearances. I will come back to that a little bit later. And I also need to put here a disclaimer, because this is no rocket science. We have just made these 9 colors in order to have interest talks to all kinds of stakeholders, and to lay a puzzle and to understand how we can reduce the use of potable and valuable drinking water. So this is the infographic we made, and if you want to read more about this infographic and all the explanation of the colors, there is a link below where you can find the report. And this infographic really nice shows that water in itself is already circular, but we can do a lot more than that. Let me introduce you to all the different colors a little bit more. Let's start with indigo, and that are the world's oceans and sea, and that's the largest reservoir. More than 70% of the Earth's surface that is covered by water, and that are the oceans and the seas. And 98, and Ivo just said 97, but 98 or 97% of all that water is present on the globe is in the world oceans and sea. In these world oceans and sea, the seas are very often more than 200 meters of depth. And that means that in these parts of the sea, there is a very low nutrient level. And we call them a sort of deserts, the deserts of the sea. And because of the low nutrient levels, and because also the high salinity in these parts of the seas, there is hardly any food production possible. But the world oceans and sea, they play an important role in transportation. Let's go then to the fertile coastal areas, and this is really interesting because these are the transitions areas. That is where two systems, so water and land, meet each other. Then we talk about the deltas, the estuaries, the coastal zones, and these are under influence of terrestrial processes. And that means that there are a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. These areas are very interesting for food production because the salinity is not at that high level as in the deep sea, and there's quite often a lot of nutrients available. But I already mentioned that in the beginning of the presentation, we have to deal with an upcoming salinization in agriculture in these coastal areas. Then we have the water in the air, solid, liquid, and gas. That's really underutilized. There are a lot of things we could do with water in the air, the solid, the liquid, and the gas fraction. Very nice examples, we've explained them in our report, are the Water Smart City, the High Noon project in India, and then also there is a very nice example in the Netherlands, and that's called Mijn Waterfabriek. What you could do with this type of water. When water touches the roofs of the houses, of the buildings, or the soil, then it can remain on the top. You can see that in the picture, very nice. It can also remain in the upper levels of the soil, and that we call hanging water. There is also a cycle due to evaporation and transpiration by plants. So that has always been the case, but things are changing there also, because we have to deal in short periods with huge amounts of water, so floods, so rain showers, and we also have to deal with extreme drought periods. So we have to think on how can we store the water in these extreme waterfall periods for the periods of drought, for example, and what can we do with this type of surface water? When the white water touches the rivers and the lakes by, for example, meltwater, which is very interesting because that can be used as drinking water, then it floats via the rivers towards the oceans and the seas. During this process, we have during this floating, we have the industrial processes. So industry are taking water out of the rivers, but also farmers are taking water for irrigation purposes, and they also drain water towards the rivers. This type of water, so the blue water, surface water, is getting more and more scarce. We also need to think on how can we save this type of water, and what can we do and optimize this type of water in our food system. Now, water soaks deep in the ground, and that was called terra. There is stored in so-called aquifers that can be superficial with a higher microbiological pollution, but it can also be very deep, and it can be more than 10,000 meters deep, and that is of extreme good quality. So, and that then is the supply of our fresh water, and that's approximately 30% of world's fresh water is obtained from these so-called aquifers. This is the freshwater belt, and that was mentioned before also, but that is finite. This really will be a problem in the nearby future. So we need to think on how to reduce the use of these finite resources, and also we need to think on how can we replenish these sources. There's another problem appearing, that's the salty seawater penetration of these aquifers. And especially when we want to take water from the superficial aquifers, then we have to deal with all kinds of microbiological pollution. So potable water mentioned before already, that's the color aqua. Now, potable water is essential to health. It's a basic human right. It's a component of effective policy for health protection. We also call it quite often tap water, and that's most of the time drinking water, although not always, but let's say tap water is drinking water. And that valuable water is used for almost everything. And we really need to rethink how we want to deal with this valuable water. So we have to think on how can we reduce that, and what can we do when we use this water with the spilled tap water, for example, which is now drained through the sewer system. That's the same is the case with processed water. That's the color gray. That's used tap water, that's used in households, that's used in food processing, but it's also used, for example, in livestock farming. And there are a lot of nutrients available in this type of water. We can do a lot of innovative things with processed water. Of course, there are also, and that's what I call challenges, of course, there are also quality concerns. We need to think about that too. And then there is black water, and black water is really interesting because that is quite often that valuable potable drinking water, tap water, that's used to flush our toilets. And in this toilet system, there are human excreta, but it could also be animal excreta, of course. But there are excreta present. There is urine present, so a lot of nitrogen. There is a lot of disposals are present in this system, for example, toilet paper. But there are a lot of nutrients available in black water, and we really need to think what we could do with these nutrients and how can we collect them out of this black water. Of course, there's a lot of water, and we can turn this water back into safe and drinking water. There are a lot of examples of that, but also in the Netherlands, and that will be a point of talk later on in this session. There is biophosphate present, very interesting in black water, potassium and nitrogen. So that are the 9 colors. Then there is a 10th appearance of water, and that's what we call hidden water. That's invisible. That's water used for food, for feed, for fabrics production, and other half fabricates originated from natural cultivation, and that's used for global trade. And Europe, for example, is the largest importer of hidden water worldwide. So this concept shows how large the role of water is in our present economic system, and it really stretch out that it's really important to think about a food security and valuing water program. So there are a lot of opportunities, but also challenges for the future. And this presentation was a little bit meant to be a call to action. I've tried to explain that water's role in the food system is really complex, but there are a lot of opportunities. I didn't have the time to point out all these opportunities, and of course there are challenges, and these opportunities and challenges, they require innovation. And I'm a researcher, and I do know that research can't do this alone. We need citizens, we need governments, and we also need entrepreneurs. And so let's do this together. I want to acknowledge my colleagues from Team Circularity, but especially Geert Hoekstra, Simke Kruidering, but also Reinier Nauta and Ivo Dermes. And that will be it for now, Ivo, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Adriaan. Interesting to see the 9 and even the 10th color of water. Thanks, and this helped in bridging water to the circular agriculture in the Netherlands. Very, very, very welcome. Thanks. Peter, I assume you're not there yet, so that means, Willemien, that I would like to invite you to take the floor. But before that, Adriaan, thanks again. And some of the topics you touched upon will be in the panel discussion with Jan Jansen. So stay tuned. later in this hour. Willemien, you are Director International of the top sector AGRI and Food. And I'm very curious how a combined approach with a lot of stakeholders works. The floor is yours, Willemien.
Thank you so much, Ivo, and hello to everybody. My name indeed is Willemien van Asselt. I will try by sharing my screen with you. Ivo, just to check, can everybody see it?
Yes, and we see your editing screen in the PowerPoint. That's better, yes. Thanks.
Yes. Great, thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation. The last couple of months, I like to start my presentation by showing a quote, because I think in general, a quote says a lot more than maybe a big story or a pile of papers. This one is from World Economic Forum saying our collective ambition is bigger than one stakeholder, one initiative, and one innovation. And I think this goes really much for the agro water situation that we talk about today.
De menu praat.
Sorry?
And that's good news that Peter is back in the session, where there was the noise that he muted already. Thanks.
Yes. So my name indeed is Willemien van Asselt. I work as Director International Cooperation and Relations for top sector Agri and Food, one of the top sectors in the Netherlands, where public-private cooperation is the key. I come back to that a bit later. And actually, I'm very thrilled by the session of today. My background is in international land and water management. So for me, it's quite obvious that water and food should be and are connected. Like Ivo stressed in the beginning, the climate change is asking actually for more integration between water and food in many, many countries. And I do believe it's a challenge, but also an opportunity to join forward towards the future. I was asked to tell something today about a best practice in international arena, which is actually the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. Mekong Delta, like the Netherlands, is a delta. And I think this is a really good example where you can see that water and food are much related and should be integrated. Actually, deltas, for a long time ago, people settled in deltas because of the opportunities. They not only had food, they had fertile soils, they had fresh waters, and there were a lot of reasons why people settled in deltas. This is the same in the Netherlands as well as Vietnam. And at the same time, in the last recent years, we see a lot of things happening to the climate, which makes actually living in the deltas become a bigger challenge. The deltas are threatened by flooding, by droughts, by salination of water and soils, and a lot of threats are happening both actually in Vietnam as well as in the Netherlands. Actually, just recently this year, we had a big flood in the Netherlands, and one of the things that happened is because of the delta approach that Adriaan was telling about, we were able at least to stop the water and to keep it within the borders of the river instead of causing a lot of troubles. And at the same time, this shows the transition into climate towards situations that will probably happen more and more in the future. So the Netherlands has a long-term experience and also relation with the river. And this means that we build a lot of knowledge in the past with Knowledge Institute, with business, but also in government, how to reshape the Dutch landscape into a more resilient landscape to safeguard the future. I like to stress a couple of key elements, and this is, I think, key, and it shows also that water and agri are much related. First of all, and I think this is become more and more important in the future, is that building with nature is important. So instead of working against nature, we should work with nature rather than only keep it out. Nature offers also a lot of opportunities. A second is important is that in the Netherlands, we look at food system in an inclusive way, which means we look at production, but we also look at the people that produce the food, like farmers, the people that consume the food, the consumers, but also the total food chain. And what is also key and was stressed by Adriaan also is that I do believe that this integrated approach is important, making plans, see how this could work in practice. And at the same time, we should also act. So this means that looking for no regret solutions to build and act on now, besides making the plans in the parallel. I like to mention a couple of examples how we work actually together as the Netherlands and Vietnam in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. One of the topics that shows this climate change is the saline agriculture. As Adriaan already stressed, the deltas become more and more saline. We see that in the Netherlands as well. In our coasts, in our regions, the saline water is coming in. And at the same time, you could see this also as, how strangely this may sound, as an opportunity. Because in the last couple of years, a lot of research has been done about saline agriculture and the potential of saline agriculture. In the last year, the Embassy of the Netherlands put out a call to action for small projects to the business community of Vietnam and the Netherlands to come up with smaller projects that could help in developing saline agriculture in the Mekong Delta and Vietnam. At the same time, you see in the Netherlands that the Netherlands Water Partnership and the Netherlands Food Partnership are coming together by organizing seminars with the water tech community and the food community on this important topic of saline agriculture. And some even say that saline agriculture has the potential to feed the growing world population by developing different types of foods. Of course, the seed sector can play an important role, but also because there are a lot of foods that are resistant to more saline conditions. Nature-based solutions is the second example I like to mention. I was actually quite astonished to learn in 2020 during the UN Environmental Days that Vietnam is the 16th in a row when it comes to biodiversity. A lot of nature and also a lot of potential, how strangely this may sound. Because in this biodiversity is also a strong foundation to look for nature-based solutions and to come up with other types of initiatives. How can we use these nature-based solutions to protect the rivers and the people that live on the border of the rivers from erosion? And at the same time work on economical growth with shrimp farmers and on nature conservation with the mangrove forests. There is a lot of untapped potential in these nature-based solutions in deltas, towards the cities, but always also towards the rivers. This picture intends to show that integrated approaches also means that you need to integrate more different types of stakeholders in the solution. How can we involve industries? How can we convince them to use or to reuse water from other industries? How can we grow weeds into the river and use these weeds for the feed for the cows instead of importing soy from all the way over the world? How can we develop agro parks that not only produce fresh foods and process these foods, but also help setting up new chains? I think what I'm trying to say is that what is the problem for one sector can be the solution for another. Resources become more and more scarce, and I think that we need to look at ways to use our joint technologies, both in the water sector, the maritime sector, the harbor sector, and the food sector to come up with new solutions using our technology and trying to scale them. In the Netherlands, actually, this is one of the reasons why in our innovation agenda, we put water, food, and agriculture together in one agenda. We formulated missions like circular agriculture, so the reuse of each other's raw materials, climate resilient, good food, which means nutrition, and also sustainable waters and delta, because we are a delta. On the right, you see key technologies, because we do believe that key technologies can be a driver towards these other missions like circular, climate, and sustainability. How can we cooperate internationally? This brings me back to my first slide. I think not one country has the capacity to do this alone. I think we must join forces. And I hope this can be indeed a call to action today, to join forces towards a low carbon and more green economy. I also would like to invite you, of course, to join forces with us on the Mekong Delta. We are about to accelerate, trying to scale solutions and cooperate towards a more sustainable delta. I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I hope this will be a fruitful session and panel discussion as well. You can find my details here, so please reach out to me if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Willemien. That's very helpful to see how a systematic approach works also abroad, and good to see how we're tying all the ends within the Netherlands. Thank you for that. Later we come to a discussion a bit more on how coalitions work with Martin Lok. But right now, Peter, I see in the chat that you're ready for it. Thanks for being here with us today. May I introduce you, Peter Diaz. He is Director of the International Department within the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. But for this respect, maybe it's more important that he is Chairman of the Intergovernmental Committee on the Netherlands Water Ambition in the Netherlands. Peter, we're curious to learn your remarks. And I understood, dear audience, that Peter was able to speak, but had some difficulties in hearing us. And he just puts in the chat that it doesn't work right now. So we'll still keep on trying, because I'm very, very curious to hear your view from the government perspective. So on the behind the scenes, we'll work a bit to make this work. But that means that I will take you to the discussion with our panelists. We have panelist Jan Jansen. Talk to him. I introduced him very briefly before. I'll do so a bit more. And we have Martin Lok. Jan Jansen, I would like to start with you. You're from the World Biobased Center in Zevenelle, and you are working with some of the aspects with Adriaan was touching upon before. So I'm curious to learn a bit more about what works and what doesn't work. But first of all, who are you and what is the initiative in Zevenelle? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Jan Jansen. I'm a business developer in the circular economy. In the past, I was an entrepreneur in the feed business, so the input side from the intensive livestock. And now I'm making the transition, and as Adriaan told, how can we come from black water to green gold? I developed a biotransition plant in which we put in the manure from the livestock, but also in which we put in the faces from the people, the shit. And we have the technology at this moment to make from the black water pure water, to make energy and to make nutrients. Nutrients as phosphorus, potassium and nitrogen, which is very useful again for the circular economy to produce the bread for the people. We did it in an integrated approach, as Willemien told, because I did not put together farmers. A couple of farmers is one of the project partners, but I put in the paper industry because they need a lot of energy and they need a lot of water. I put in the water authority, which is doing the sewage treatment, and I put in entrepreneurship, small cap enterprises who have the technology to fill the system.
Wow. And then does it work automatically, or what do you need to make it work, Jan?
What we did is then project, we joined the forces of the company I told you, and I think we made a very good business case in which we can count that we have about 100,000 tons less carbon dioxide in the air. So we have a very good business case, and now we are trying to get from the business case to execute the plant.
And is that, can you, I mean, I can imagine that then still it doesn't work automatically. What are the main hurdles? Last Friday we discussed this session a bit. And you mentioned some things which really, well, not on the technical side, but what is needing to change?
The main hurdle we have to take, it's a collaboration between a public company, between industrial company, and between entrepreneurs, which talk on a different level. We have to deal with legislation. For example, Smurfit Kappa is paying tax, ETS tax for Brussels, but we cannot balance the tax with our CO2 emissions about the decrease. We do need permits for a factory, but in Holland we have a lot of resistance against the intensive livestock farming. So it's very difficult. It costs you about 5 to 10 years to get a permit for such a factory. Third point is the sourcing of the manure. In Holland, the politics are discussing if they want to decrease the livestock with 10, 20, or maybe 50%. And when you need a permit, and that takes 5 years, and you don't know if you have at that time enough manure, you have a problem to finance the startup cost. That's what our hurdles are in 4 steps.
Yeah, wow. And is that also including the public debate, Jan?
Now, I think that the solution is that we want to take the public as an investor in this project, because the public, the consumers, the inhabitants of the region, they can get biogas from us. So they have a good replacer from the gas from Groningen, which is very good for nature. We can get them less cost for water purification, so they feel it, and they can invest in the water plant, in this green gold plant. And I think that could be the solution. And then we need a government to join us to finance the startup cost, because I think it's a very good business case, and the inhabitants are willing to invest in this kind of cases, like they do that at this moment in windmills.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting. So then you also give the public at large, so us as inhabitants, also a role and a stake in in a circular economy?
Yes, I think that it's very important to have the public at your side, to have support of what we are doing, because when we bring back the nutrients to nature, when we close the circular economy, we have the knowledge and the possibility to feed 9 billion people all over the world. And to do that, it's very important that intensive livestock is part of that.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Jan. We might come back to you, but thanks for your contribution. And I'm really, well, I wish I could see it in practice in a couple of years. Really
be welcome. We have a very nice pilot plant already working.
Yeah, nice. Thanks so much. Then I would like to ask Martin Lok to come in. Martin, you're executive director of the Capitals Coalition, and for what I understand, a coalition is about working together and connecting people and organizations. Could you say a bit more about the Capitals Coalition, Martin?
Yes, of course. Ivo, thank you for having me here. Indeed, my name is Martin Lok. I'm the executive director of the Capitals Coalition, which is a global collaboration of over 400 different organizations, ranging from business to finance, to civil society organizations, NGOs, academia, standard setters, accountancy bodies, etc. So we are really a broad organization with a single joint ambition, and that is to transform the way how we make decisions. And we want to transform the way how decisions are made, because nowadays the majority of the decisions are taken on incomplete information. So we don't account for impacts and dependencies on nature, on water, on soil, as well as on people or a society. So the majority of the decisions are mainly or strongly biased towards financial capital and not to other capitals. So that's why we have formed this coalition to help transforming the way decisions are made.
Yeah. And what do you think is needed to have the companies relate to water and food even more?
Yes, so a very important element for companies, but also for finance or for governments, is to really understand how are you impacting, how are you depending on your environment, on nature, and on people. And it seems almost that we have forgotten how to do that. So in a lot of situations, you don't know as a business leader or as a portfolio manager within finance, what are exactly these impacts and dependencies. So we came together as a coalition in 2012 at the moment of Rio +20, a collaboration of business and NGOs at that time. And we started to develop an international approach, a framework how to better account for impacts and dependencies on nature and people. So we published 2 protocols, recognized globally as front-running protocols to help understanding these relationships. So what business can do is take these protocols, apply all of the methods, the tools that are part of this general frameworks, to better understand how they are depending sometimes on water resources, even if they are not that aware of it.
Wow. What I'm curious of to learn even more, in setting those coalitions, what can we learn from it? What should we do in taking up all the calls for actions Adriaan and Willemien shared with us? What is your experience? What actually works?
Yes. So one of the first lessons, and it might be a little bit of, as we say in Dutch, an open door, but what is very important, if you want to change decision making, the first thing you need to be clear of, what is the decision you're taking, that you want to take. So a lot of the times data is just gathered without a specific aim of it. So you need to be clear on what is the decision you want to take. So if you're a company and you want to, for example, take decisions for an investment of a new plant or a new process, that is a different approach than when you want to better understand your strategic position using your annual reports, or it's quite different from appraisal of the different options for resources that you want to use. So you have to be clear on that. And then I think you need to put in a little bit sweat and tears. You really need to deep dive into getting the understanding, what is my relationship with nature or with people? And so there's, and that's why we collaborate with accountants a lot. The accountancy profession is trained to kind of structure this in a very systemic way. And so they help us to better understand all these impacts and dependencies. And then, I mean, of course, you need to measure your impacts and dependencies. You need to measure how much water do you use. But there's an additional step, and that is to decide how important that water is for you. We all know if it's summer and it's hot and you don't have water with you, a half a liter of water becomes more important to you than in winter when you have enough. So the relative importance of a liter of water can differ from place to place, from moment to moment. So not only measure, but also value the importance of the resources for you as a company is a key element. And based on that, you really come to a good appraisal, sometimes a risk assessment on your situation as a company.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe I can give an example. One of the projects we are running is together with UNEP, is what we called AGRI TEEP. It is AGRI stands for, of course, for agriculture. TEEP stands for the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity. So this is a UNEP program, and we have created practical guidelines for businesses how to better understand these impacts and dependencies.
Wow.
And we are now, with funding of the EU, rolling this out in 7 countries. Kind of funny, it's paid for by the EU, but it's not within the EU that we are implementing it. We are doing this in China, Brazil, Indonesia, India, Thailand, and Mexico. And an interesting example from Mexico is, I think, the case study that APEAM, which is the civil society association in Mexico of the avocado growers and exporters. And they are collaborating with us in this project. And they did a natural and social human capital account for themselves. And what they found out, of course, having healthy soils and good water is of a key to avocado or growers. So, but they also asked themselves, if we want to improve our situation, because that was the decision they wanted to take, what do we need to do? And they came to the conclusion that the best way forward to provide a more sustainable position for themselves was to start investing in a forest reserve. So you have avocado growers, and their conclusion is we need to invest in a forest reserve. The underlying reason for that is investing in a forest reserve helps them to improve the water quality of the water they need to grow their avocados.
Yeah. Wow. So by that way, you connected the system approach to a practical level of the farmers or the growers or the traders of the mangroves.
Yes. And to be honest, I think it even becomes more exciting and new, because part of the project in Mexico is not only the avocado growing association, but it's also other partners, including Banorte, which is one of the biggest banks in Mexico. And we combine business finance together with other organizations because we believe strongly that the only way forward is all different stakeholders use a joint understanding of how to value for your impacts and dependencies. And so Appian and Banorte, they use the same kind of understanding of value. So Banorte was having these discussions with Appian, and they came also to the conclusion investing in a forest reserve is the best way forward for the avocado sector.
Yeah.
Now they are discussing, can we do this together? And having a financial partner, if you want to start up as an avocado association, a forest reserve, is of course, I don't have to explain it to you. That's a good position to be at. So it's all about connecting the different sectors together.
Yeah, and sharing a common language then, I think. Martin,
Yes.
1 minute, then your take on what's happening international now. COP on climate, biodiversity meetings in China. Is that of any relevance, I would say?
Yeah, of course it is, but let me focus on, is it relevant for business? Because, I mean, I have a background over 30 years working for the government in the Netherlands. So I know that the government is very busy with climate COP and with the negotiations for a new nature policy. But it's also of relevance for business. So I'm one of the co-founders of Business for Nature, which is a global business community that is advocating for a ambitious nature policy. And we work very closely together with Willemien Business, which is a business association that is now very active in Glasgow. What we found out is that we all bring the same lessons, the same advice to the policy negotiators, to the world leaders. We being all of the business community worldwide. And a key message is ensure, make certain that all business and finance embed the value of nature and people into their decision making. Make it mandatory to do this.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a nice message to convey to Glasgow and the others. Thank you, Martin. Thank you also to the others, Jan, Adriaan, Willemien. I will now give the floor to Peter, who has trouble understanding us and hearing us, but we really are curious to learn what Peter has to share with us. Thank you for being with this session. I suppose Peter will close up and round up the entire session. Otherwise, I'll say a few words just before 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Okay, because I cannot hear you. It's really a shame. Sorry for having these technical problems. I would have loved to open this session. Now I think it's a time to close it, or about to close. Yes. Well, as chair of the Intergovernmental Committee responsible for the Netherlands International Water Ambition, I'm of course excited to see that two policy domains, water and agro, come together in one session. It's in the core of the Netherlands Water Ambition to break silos and to cross boundaries. So that we can be as impactful as possible when it comes to water and agricultural policy. Because, well, a layman would not expect it, but water and agricultural policy are actually quite often isolated, despite the tremendous interaction on the ground. And it's rather striking that in 20 years of the existence of the Amsterdam International Water Week, this is actually the first time that the agricultural food nexus is on the agenda. So I can only applaud that. Of course, I have not exactly heard what the relevant speakers have brought about, but I think, well, maybe they also made a link to the sustainable development goals, and of course the Netherlands, as all countries, is very committed to the SDGs to deal with all the big challenges in an integral manner. And in that respect, an interdisciplinary approach is clearly needed in order to see the cohesion between the different parts of the food system and its outcomes in socio-economic and environmental terms, as well as to create a better understanding of the feedback loops between the different elements of food systems. And everybody understands we cannot do these things alone. It's a joint effort. National governments, water authorities, companies, investors, farmers' knowledge, institutes, consumers, and society as a whole. We need all these actors together. Now, the Dutch water sector can, wants, and will play a role in this food system transition. I hope that is what we learned today. But most importantly, we learned that water and food agriculture are highly interlinked. We cannot adapt or change agricultural systems without adapting or changing our water systems, and vice versa. So I hope that as of now, every Amsterdam International Water Week will host also water agricultural sessions so that we can continue to seek synergies and to join forces in the national as well as global challenge that we all share. Back to you, Ivo.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I was wondering, whether I could ask you a question, but I think you said enough in the sense that, what I would like to know, Peter, no, but it's difficult in communication. Let's have a quick check at the Q&A. That was still the question and the remark from Martijn van Staveren, which is certainly true. And with this then, with no more questions, except the one of Leila asking for the coordinates of Jan Jansen and Martin Lok, and maybe Martin, you can share yours as well in a direct message. I would like to thank the audience for joining us today and getting in touch with the experts on continuation of their call to action. And we will continue during this Amsterdam International Water Week tomorrow with a session on water and food. A session on salinity and water and food is scheduled for Wednesday, and Thursday water and food will be part of the Industrial Leaders Forum of the Amsterdam International Water Week. And then we are on track to deliver nice insights on water and food during the 2023 UN Water Conference organized by the Netherlands and Tajikistan. But before that, I hope we'll meet at the plant of Jan Jansen to see actually how circularity works in practice. Thank you for joining us. See you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.